Hey, what's up, everybody? It's me, Robert Phoenix. We are back here for another edition of Sunday Night AstroLive. As you can tell, I am on the road, and it has been a very pleasant, low key weekend. Went out to Johnson City last night, which I think of all the areas, I would include Fredericksburg. I think Johnson City has the best lights. Although there is a big kind of drive-through thing in Austin, in Zilker Park, but you get in your car, you drive, and it's I don't know, it's kind of a production. But in Johnson City, you're outside, you're walking around, and they have the Pergnalis electrical company, and they're the ones that string up the town. And boy, it's just really spectacular. And sometimes I get kind of wax philosophical about the holidays because, on the one hand, it, based on my research and whether you believe in historical Jesus or not, that's up to you. But based on my research and the research of other Christian scholars who do not deny astrotheology, the actual birth date of Jesus is 9/11, which I've covered on this show on numerous occasions. I think I did the first Jesus 9/11 show on Gaia TV back in, I think it was at 2013 or 2014. It was 2013. And when I first started to uncover that and get into it, not just look at sort of what was going on celestially at that time of the birth and the connection between Regulus and Jupiter, which made this star, this great star, even more prominent in the sky. There was also a lot of other events that took place on 9/11 historically, where it was like, oh, well, look at this. And what was really interesting, and it's really hard to go back and find things with the internet now, but I distinctly remember at least three, perhaps four nuclear tests, both in the United States and in Russia, that occurred on 9/11. And I thought, this is really odd. And so I went back into Wikipedia later, and those were all gone. And I'm not sure if they were put there by error or whether, the editors of Wikipedia removed them. I'm leaning into the latter because they also removed a pretty significant event, which was the founding of the Anti-Freemasonic Party, which took place on 9/11. And that was removed from Wikipedia. So you can still find that the Pentagon they broke ground on the Pentagon on 9/11, right? So that's still in Wikipedia. And New York essentially was seen, New Amsterdam, which would become New York, would be New Amsterdam, would be seen for the first time by the Dutch, and that happened on 9/11 as well. So you have these two very intrinsic dates that involve the city of New York and the Pentagon, both of which were connected to 9/11. So there's a lot that just kind of, some is still there, but a lot of it has been removed. And then I've done webinars on sort of the pagan celebration of Christmas, which is really based on Nimrod and his son and his mother wife, who is the sort of the mother of his son, right? Who is Cush. I've done lots of stuff on that, and the whole idea of the Christmas tree and mistletoe goes back to Babylonian times. So there's a lot that, if you kind of wipe away the gloss in the surface of the quote unquote holy days, what are you really left with, right? If it's, in my estimation, if it's not sort of the birth of baby Jesus, which I do believe happened, and it happened during a different day and time. And it is not about the sort of the pagan celebration, the unknowingly pagan celebration and veneration to Nimrod, whose wife mother was Semiramis, the triple goddess. If you didn't know all that, then you'd have to ask yourself, well, what is it about? Well, on tonight's show, what I'm going to attempt to bring to the table here is the fact that it is a celebration astrotheologically of Capricorn, Saturn, Jupiter, and Sagittarius. And I have a little slideshow that I've put together in order to illustrate that. That includes the latter day version of Santa Claus, which was given to us by the artist Haddon Sonfeld, who was hired by Coca-Cola, amongst other companies, to do poster art and art that would display their company logos and wares. He was a commercial artist, and he's a pretty interesting character. And we're going to find the spirit of Christmas inside of his astrological chart. So, in a lot of ways, he's kind of the father of Christmas in the sort of the modern sense, where we get Coca-Cola's version of Santa Claus, or at least his rendering of, which has become kind of the de facto standardized. I don't know if they have a patent on that Santa. I think they might have had a patent on it for a while. I think they still do, actually, or a copyright, but it's just become so popular that they can't really enforce it. But before that, back in the mists of time, Santa was a very different character, and in fact, a compendium of different characters that we're going to look at. And what they all share in common is the astrological themes of Capricorn, Saturn, Jupiter, and Sagittarius. And that during the season, we're kind of in the interface between the two. If you were to go back into the Julian calendar, it would, right around this time, would bring us kind of close in some ways to, let's see, the Julian calendar was, so this would be in the Julian calendar, like almost right at the beginning of Sagittarius. It's about, what, 14 or 15 days, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a different calendar. But that said, we still run into the two same signs and the two same planets. It's a dance between Saturn and Jupiter as we move into the holidays. And I hope everybody's having a good one and that you're enjoying this time where you're here in the Northern Hemisphere. I think you guys down in the Southern Hemisphere have your own versions of this, and in your own way. But we just get it with, I think, more of the sort of the winter feel, the winter vibe with the snow and all that stuff, which makes it very seasonal and charming, to say the least. Okay, let's see. Let's do a little roll call here as we see who shows up tonight. We got DJMC. There's Michael, Ruby Redbud, the lovely and talented one. There's my man Steve, Thor at the door, Barbara Boots. This should be Rich, Santa and Coke. Oh, yeah. Santa and Coke. Ho, ho, ho. Let's see. QZ, what's up? Checking in. Love to all from Maine. Love back. Who else? Green Eyed Crow. What's up, Green Eye? Checking in from Utah. Elsbeth Harriman. From down under, we got Ratchet Boob. We got Raffy. We got Tondar. Hey, Tondar. Tondar, old timer. Good to see you. Pengreedy. What's up, Pengreedy? Sun Tzu. Warmest of welcomes to all from sunny Palm Desert, California. You know, they have those great clouds in Palm Desert, California that look like the mothership UFOs. Have you guys ever seen those? They're kind of mind-blowing. Aaron T40, or Aaron, We'll call you Aaron T. Hello. She's checking in from Minneapolis and the home of their retarded governor. I'm sorry. I hope I didn't offend anybody. Those were not my words. Those were the words of Donald Trump. I can blame it on Trump. Kelly Zatt. What's up, Kelly Zatt? Daniel. Hello, Daniel. From New York. Aloha. Back at you. Let's see. Oh, look at that. Green-eyed Crow's gonna put the Christmas decorations up with the grandkids. Cool. I think I got the Christmas lights go up tomorrow. I think Christmas lights are on the program for tomorrow. Amy V. What's up, Amy V? Trailer park person. I love watching these van life videos on YouTube. There was this one woman who had, what the hell does she have? I think she had like a Toyota, one of those Toyota hatchbacky things that looks kind of like a station wagon, one of those crossovers. And she was like very thorough about how to camp and where to stealth camp and how to do it. Like you could tell she was seasoned. And it always amazes me how much people can fit inside of some of these vehicles. Like it blows my mind. So whenever I feel like we're behind the eight ball, like the human race is behind the eight ball, I watch some van life people because they're so fucking clever with how they arrange everything. It rivals the Japanese on the maximization of space. And these people basically live in these, and some of them are just like freaking mind blowing what they've done. I mean, the amount of kind of micro environments that you have in sort of a Mazda minivan, incredible. So whenever I feel a little down, I go watch some van life, and usually people showing off how tight and efficient their rigs are. So trailer park person, greetings. Misbehaving 2 is here. Tom Jordan. There's Tom Jordan. Greetings, Tom. Sandra D is here. KK Smith. I don't want to give you 3 Ks. That might get you in trouble on YouTube. We'll give you the 2. You wouldn't get in trouble here, but you get in trouble on YouTube. California Contrarian. Let's see what else we have here. Gucci the Goats. Hey, what's going on, Gucci? Gucci the Goats. It's one of our celebrities. Let's see what else do we have here. Yes, Jake. Gucci the Goats goes by Jake. That's right. Lisa Ann White is here. The Law. JJ Rain de Blanc, our resident artisan craftsman. Yes, yesterday was St. Nicholas Day. That's right. And the day before that was Krampus Day. And St. Nicholas and Krampus, they got a little odd couple tag team going on, which we're going to look at tonight. Let's see who else we have here. Hey, we got Jack Strom. What's going on, Jack? Good to see you. Let's see. What else do we have here? I had a Krampus for his cool. Krampus is making a comeback. The Krampus celebrations are started. I think millennials took a hankering to Krampus. He became like a mascot. He became like a power animal, I think, for the millennials. Krampus did. Mark Guest in the house. What's up, Mark Guest? Good to see you. Oli Fonseca checking in from San Diego. What's up, Oli? Balboa Park in the holiday season is also really, really nice. Sun Tzu, yes, I see those UFO clouds are. Yeah, you got the mothership hiding behind those things. Motherships. Guy Dance is picking cherries and raspberries. Wow, it is going off down under, down in New Zealand. The Kiwis are warming up. We're warming up in different ways. We got Jam Chloe. It's Jam Chloe's birthday. What's up, Jam Chloe? Happy solar return. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Jam Chloe. Happy birthday to you. And many, many more. Ursula Hauser. Hey, for Prescott. There's our friend Ursula, the intrepid Gemini herself. We got an all-star crew here. Christmas lights are up, started wrapping, trying to get ahead of it all. Wow, that is some Virgo energy right there. Let's see. The great Dalmuti, Van Lifers and Tony Homers are similar. They are. Like, how much living can they put within those four walls, whether they're movable or not? It's very, very similar. Yep. Was I in Austin yesterday at Randall's? No, I was not. I was in Austin yesterday. Where was I in Austin yesterday? I went to this leather shop, and I got coffee at a leather shop. It's a kind of a weird setup. So it's like this place that does really nice leather craft, but they also have an espresso maker. So we went there, and remember I was telling you guys about like travel and stuff, right? Where we had this Mars Neptune square going on. I got hit. I got hit on Saturday. I got two things from my own life about my forecasts that have actually come to fruition. It wasn't a terrible hit, although I did feel it. I got bumped in the back by, I think it was like a smart car or something. Like, they were just not paying attention. They're just tooling down the road with their dog out the window. And I was coming up to a stoplight, and I gently put on my brakes, and they weren't paying attention. And all of a sudden, boom! I'm like, oh shit! And I pulled into this parking lot, and there was no visible damage, right? But I talked about, you had to watch out for people on the roads with this Mars Neptune square, mostly due to over imbibing, but also not paying attention, right? And so somebody was taking the snooze at the wheel. And the other thing, remember I told you guys last week, go out and buy a lottery ticket? Did any of you listen to me? Here's what happened to me. That day, I went to go buy a space heater. And I had Walmart in my brain because that's what we have in Kerrville. We got a Walmart. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to go to Gibson's instead. Gibson's is like this old school hardware store. You can get anything there. Anything. So I went to Gibson's, and I got a space heater. And lo and behold, I wound up spending $50 there. I got a raffle ticket for every $10 I spent. So I got 5 raffle tickets because I spent $50. And that was the day that I went out and told people to maybe take a flyer on a lottery ticket, which I don't normally do. So if the phrase, sometimes you find fortune and sometimes fortune finds you. We'll see. The lottery goes off on the 28th of December, and you must be present to win. So I may show up. You never know. The grand prize is a $5,000 shopping spree in Kerrville. How about that? I wonder what I can get with $5,000 in Kerrville. I know what I can get at Gibson's: a lot of ammunition. I could load up on the ammunition at Gibson's. It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting. Maybe I'd let some less fortunate person spend some of it. Who knows? It's like I don't really need much. But I was also yesterday in Austin. Where else were we? We got the coffee. I think that's about it. I'm not sure how close to Randall's it was, but I think that was about I met Dean from Ray from Silver-Botanicals, which I'm going to talk about here in a second. Must have been my double. I've got a few of those running around. I don't know how to rein them in. The beauty of core physics coming in from Costa Rica. It's all about Jesus. No slow, slender fights. It's summer. Nativity scene is everywhere. Summer Christmas in Costa Rica. That sounds like it could be the backdrop of a movie. Like there's got to be a movie in that backdrop somewhere. My cousin lives in a van like that. His toilet is in his shower. I'm telling you, man, these people are mad geniuses. Let's see. We got 153, 1543 SP. Sherry. Hi, Sherry. You're not a number. Esther Swift. And another beautiful Advent season. Hi, Esther Swift. Salutations from the Truth Nova, formerly on Blog Talk. Wow. That's going on. That's going back a ways. Blog Talk Radio. Man, we're going back into the 2010s. Blog Talk Radio was cool. There was a cool thing happening on Blog Talk Radio, and then it just couldn't sustain itself. There were too many people on there using the service, and then YouTube comes in, and Blog Talk was a thing. I remember you. I remember Truth Nova. When does Saturnalia begin? The official dates of Saturnalia. Let's dial that in. Saturnalia starts on the 17th of December in the Julian calendar. So the Julian calendar is, so what's interesting is in the Julian calendar, I believe Lenin is in Aries versus in the Gregorian calendar where he's a Taurus. And Lenin as an Aries makes a lot of sense. Let's see. Let me get you some dates here. So Saturnalia theoretically starts on the 17th of December. We could move that forward into the Gregorian calendar. So 17th of December, Saturnalia. Again, what are we talking about? We're talking about either Saturn or Jupiter or Sagittarius, Capricorn. That is the dialectic here. That's what we're dealing with. All right, let me get back to, where are we? StreamYard. Okay. I hope that helps. Let's see. Steve had a tummy Krampus once. Steve, you're so funny. Oh, a hammy Krampus? A hammy Krampus. I thought a tummy Krampus. I think I might have gotten you on that one. Hammy Krampus. Tommy Krampus. That would be a good name for a punk rock band. Shelley Myers here. Gruus von Campus. Let's see. Saturnalia the 17th. Yes. It's Healing Heart Rosie posing as Jam Chloe tonight. There's a lot of aliases happening. At this point, we're going to need self-driving cars. People are maniacs. She was just like, this woman was just having some kind of, I don't know, dream ride with her dog. Her dog was hanging. You know, it's like I pulled out and I saw her. She was far enough behind me. I was like, man, I don't need to worry. But all I could see was this smart car and this dog hanging out the passenger side with the ears flapping in the wind, right? And I think she was just like having some kind of moment with her dog. I was sitting over talking to her dog, dogs looking at her, and all of a sudden, boom, she bumps into me. Let's see. Sue Leonard. Hey, Sue, what's happening? Good to see you. Ralph, you have to go to Pahrump to buy lotto tickets over Las Vegas Casino Industrial Complex. Doesn't want lotto tickets messing with their margins. I think you got more to worry about than lotto tickets in Las Vegas. Scott bought a Powerball, lost bigly. Not your fault, though. I buy one every week. You know what I did yesterday? I bought a lottery ticket, a scratcher lottery ticket. You know what I did? I won $10. and I turned it back in, and I got another lottery ticket. I got 2 of them. You know what I did? I won $10 again. So I was a winner twice with that lottery ticket, the scratcher. If you're a hunter, you should be able to buy ammo on EBT. I like that. I like that. Janine is here. Hi, Janine. If you're a hunter, you have to qualify that, though. You have to bring something in, right? You just can't show up. Say, yo, I'm a hunter. Let's see. I remember Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio was a community. There were so many people that were in Blog Talk Radio that, if Ryan shows up, Ryan was a Blog Talk person. He's been around that far. Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. In Virginia Beach. I remember that. I was there with, what was that crew? Oh, my God. I'm drawing a blank now. I don't know, that led me to Solutions in Pennsylvania eventually. Esperanza is eating soup. Yeah, it was an art car. Unfortunately, the person was too involved in doing art or something versus driving. Peter Bayonne, what's happening, Peter? Checking in from Nashville. What orb are you done with the Pluto square sun transit? Well, I think if you get to about 3 or 4, you're in Separationville. Right. I think about 4, you're in Separationville. Pluto's separating. So Pluto is at 1 now. Well, you got there this year, but it does go retrograde. Let's see. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. I think we're good. Beth Berry's here. Hey, Beth. Double B. All right. Why don't we get going with the little presentation I have here? So we're not going to have a hugely long, epic 3-hour show. So I'm going to get into this material and navigate through the astrological roots of Santa Claus, and then we're going to look at the chart at the moment and see where everything is, and then we'll call it a night after that. So you people on the East Coast can get some sleep. How's that? All right. So let me do a shout out first before anything for our guys over at Silver-Botanicals. There it is right there. This I'm telling you, this promotion has been incredibly popular. It is the gift from the Magi bundle, with the centerpiece being the gift of the Magi spray. It's a personal space body spray, and every ingredient is from the Holy Land. Every botanical in there is from the Holy Land. And of course, you get a little bit of that nanified silver. And what it does is it cleanses and purifies, takes you right back to the Fertile Crescent. And I swear these guys should be selling a ton of this to churches. Like, there has got to be a pipeline to get this to churches. Like, can you imagine how many of gift from the Magi, just the bottles themselves, they could sell to churches? They could, if they could find that pipeline, they could probably retire. That's what I think, although they wouldn't. But that's what you get. You get the room and body spray right in the center there. Smells heavenly. You get the total body skin therapy over here, which I'm going to try. Maybe I'll try it tonight. Over here, we've got the Silver Tongue Oral Care. We have the Sea Serum, which is great for your skin. We have the Silver Mist, which is terrific for humidifiers and nebulizers. We also have the spray-on deodorant, and we have some Silver Shield sanitizer. It's a travel size, and you could take that with you. If you go, I'm telling you, if you're in a hotel, you may want to bring some of the Silver Shield sanitizer. I'm just saying. I mean, that's a place that somebody else has been. You don't really know what the crew is using. I mean, you could even like probably spray some of that stuff on your pillow, right? Just light mist it on your pillow. You could probably light mist it on other parts of the room. Then you got the gift of the Magi, which you can use as kind of a freshener. These are really, the travel size, you can put that in your suitcase and they're not going to bust you for that. Remember the good old days before they busted you for shit at the airport? And I'm not even talking about, dope or illegal drugs. I'm just talking about bottles of water. Sorry. You can't take that on the plane. You can't take that through. Anyway, normally this will cost you, if you bought each one of these individually, it would cost $99.93, but you're getting a discount, $79.94, plus you're getting free shipping. That's all you got to do. The link is in the description of the show. And if you want 10% off of anything there, besides the gift of the Magi bundle, Astro Weather's your code when you check out. You get 10% off. So it's a win-win. And we saw Ray yesterday, and met him in Austin briefly. And if you haven't seen the interview that I did with those two guys, check it out. It's a pretty cool interview. It gives you a real sense as to where American business at a scaled proportional model can be. All right. What are we looking for here? Okay. Let's get into this a little bit. All right. So we're going to get into the Astro Roots of Santa Claus. And I'm also going to be reading some things off of Wikipedia and a few other sources, just so we can back some of this stuff up. And in Wikipedia, it's not that controversial, right? Okay, so here we go. This is Santa we know. And this comes out of the illustrations of Haddon Blomfeld from the late 1920s. And basically, what you see here is sort of an amalgamation of images that Santa displayed over the years, some of which are not the most appealing, by the way. And when you take a look at Haddon Blomfeld and have a photo of him, you'll see a little bit of him in Santa as well. He's sort of memorialized himself. And astrologically, there is a reason why. Okay, so Christmas is the intersection between Saturn and Jupiter. Somebody mentioned Saturnalia, which is during this time, December 17th. And that's taking place as well, right? And Saturnalia being the worship of Saturn, Saturn being the Lord of Time, also the Grim Reaper and death, represents the sign of Capricorn. So December 17th, I think if we were in sidereal land, it would easily be in Capricorn. And if we were in the Julian calendar, I believe Capricorn as well. So we have this intersection between these two planets and these two signs at this time of year. So why don't we take a look at the Saturnian side first? Because at a certain point, they kind of merge together. So this is Krampus. And Krampus is a satanic, devilish figure. And the Krampus Fest starts on 12/5. St. Nicholas was yesterday, 12/6. So these 2 days back to back are of significant interest to this tradition. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the whole thing starts in November. So it kind of starts in Scorpio season. I think it's around 11/11, and then moves through Krampus and Krampus Fest, and then, of course, St. Nicholas. We're going to get into Krampus more here as we explore some of these themes. So, of course, when we look at Krampus, we're not very far away from Baphomet and Saturn and Capricorn. They're very, very, here he is with the Knights Templar, what they discovered. And what's interesting here is that the Knights Templar are being rewarded for their discovery. Here, children are being punished. And it's a really interesting sort of system of control in a lot of ways, right? Because St. Nicholas, the thing about St. Nicholas is that there's some historical doubt that St. Nicholas even existed. Okay. So a lot of what comes out of the St. Nicholas story is told by third parties. And so we have to take St. Nicholas with a grain of salt as well. But St. Nicholas would be the entity that would reward children, and Krampus would be the entity that would punish children, and in some cases, even take them from their homes. I've got some photos or some images of that, which are creepy. So when you see St. Nicholas and when you see Krampus, and there's another figure that goes along with St. Nicholas called Black Pete, who also is a kind of very dark figure. He's when I show you Black Pete, he is either a Moor or he got his blackness from shimmying down the chimney. So Black Pete was filled with soot, and hence the story of Santa Claus and toys and chimneys. And Santa would be parking the getaway vehicle. And the getaway vehicle wasn't even a sleigh with reindeer. That comes from another tradition. The getaway vehicle was a ship, like it was an actual ship. And St. Nicholas is supposed to have come from Spain, bearing gifts with Black Pete, the Moor. And so Black Pete would take the gifts and bring them down the chimney. We'll get into Black Pete when we come up to him. So our first big stop here is St. Nicholas. This is kind of where it all begins, is St. Nicholas. Now, again, there is some degree of doubt as to whether or not St. Nicholas existed. But because he's become such an integral part of the holiday story, his historical being has lived on and has morphed into the modern day Santa Claus. So why don't we take a look at St. Nicholas? And there's some interesting things about his sainthood and his life. So the reason why we have the celebration of St. Nicholas is because he passes away theoretically on the 6th of December. So he's born under the sign of Pisces, 15 March 270, if we're using our modern day Gregorian Placidus astrology. And what's interesting is the connection between Jupiter and Sagittarius and Jupiter and Pisces, because at one point, Jupiter was the home of Pisces. It had to double up, just like at one point they could see Saturn. Saturn was the home of Aquarius as well as Capricorn, just like how Mars was the home of Aries and Scorpio. So we had all the planets doing double duty, and it wasn't until the 3 outer planets were discovered that the various signs got shuttled off to them. So what's interesting is the connection here between Pisces and Sagittarius, Jupiter, and the 2 signs, because there was no Neptune around her. It was around, but they couldn't see it. So they're connected here. So let's go. So known as Nicholas of Bari, was an early Christian bishop of Greek descent from the maritime city of Patara in Anatolia. modern-day Antalya province, Turkey, during the time of the Roman Empire because of the many miracles attributed to his intercession. He is also known as Nicholas the Wonder Worker. St. Nicholas is the patron saint of sailors, hence sailing the ship, right? Merchants, archers, Sagittarius, repentant thieves, children, brewers. Like, what do brewers do? Brewers make a drink that makes you more expansive and jovial and will expand your midsection if you drink too much of it. He's also the patron saint of pawnbrokers, toy makers, unmarried people, and students in various cities and countries around Europe. So if you're an unmarried person and you want to get married, there's your guy right there. He'll bring you a mate wrapped up under your Christmas tree for Christmas. His reputation evolved among the pious, as was common for early Christian saints, and his legendary habit of secret gift giving gave rise to the folklore of Santa Claus, Saint Nick, through Sinterklaas, which we're going to talk about. Sinterklaas is very interesting because it is also so when you look at Santa Claus is pulling from all these different traditions. You get the German tradition where Krampus comes into play, and you get some overlap with St. Nicholas there. You definitely get St. Nicholas, and you get Black Pete in Netherlands with the Dutch. So Santa is this amalgam of influences that are kind of intersecting in this one being, which is pretty interesting. The other one is Odin. Odin is also a part of this story. We will, when we get into the connection between Odin and Jupiter and Sagittarius and the time that we're in. So it's a very wide swath, this image of Santa Claus. Little is known about the historical St. Nicholas. The earliest accounts of his life were written centuries after his death and probably contain legendary elaborations. He is said to have been born in the Anatolian seaport of Patara, Lycia, in Asia Minor, to wealthy Christian parents. In one of the earliest attested and most famous incidents from his life, he is said to have rescued 3 girls from being forced into prostitution. Now, there's another telling of this story where the 3 girls are also his daughters. But let's go through this one first. By dropping a sack of gold coins through the window of their house each night for 3 nights so their father could pay a dowry for each of them. Other early stories tell of him calming a storm at sea, saving 3 innocent soldiers from wrongful execution, and chopping down a tree possessed by a demon. In his youth, he is said to have made a pilgrimage to Egypt and Syria, Palestina. Shortly after his return, he became Bishop of Myra. He was later cast into prison during the persecution of the Diocletian, but was released after the accession of Constantine. Now, supposedly, he was at the Council of Nicaea, although that has been disputed a bit. Let me read this here. An early list makes him an attendee at the First Council of Nicaea in 325, but he's never mentioned in any writings by people who were at the council. Late unsubstantiated legends claim that he was temporarily defrocked and imprisoned during the council for slapping the heretic Arius. Another famous late legend tells how he resurrected 3 children who'd been murdered and pickled in brine by a butcher, planning to sell them as pork during a famine. Well, I can see butchers killing children and brining them and selling them as pork. I can see that. Now, him resurrecting them from that fate, that's a whole other tale of the miraculous. Fewer than 200 years after Nicholas's death, the St. Nicholas Church was built in Myra under the orders of Theodosius II over the site of the church where he had served as bishop, and his remains were moved to a sarcophagus in that church. In 1087, while the Greek Christian inhabitants of the region were subjugated to the newly arrived Muslim Seljuk Turks, and soon after the beginning of the East-West Schism, a group of merchants from the Italian city of Bari removed the major bones of Nicholas's skeleton from his sarcophagus in the church without authorization and brought them to their hometown, where they are now enshrined in the Basilica di San Nicola. The remaining bone fragments from the sarcophagus were later removed by Venetian sailors and taken to Venice during the First Crusade. So they called that the cult of relics. And that's where modern day museums got their start. It was these guys going to the Holy Land and other parts of Christendom and bringing things back so that they had a totemic value, right? And this is where the first museums are born, the cult of relics. Very little is known about St. Nicholas's historical life. Any writings Nicholas himself may have produced have been lost. He's not mentioned in any contemporary chroniclers. This is not surprising, since Nicholas lived during a turbulent time in Roman history. The earliest mentions of St. Nicholas indicate that by the 6th century, his following was already well established. Less than 200 years after St. Nicholas's probable death, the Eastern Roman Empire, Theodosius II, 401 to 450, ordered the building of the Church of St. Nicholas in Myra, which thereby preserves an early mention of his name. The Byzantine historian Procopius, famous writer Procopius, also mentions that the Emperor Justinian, ruled 527 to 565, renovated churches in Constantinople dedicated to St. Nicholas and St. Priscus, which may have originally been built as early as c. 490. Nicholas's name also occurs as Nicholas of Myra of Lycia on the 10th line of a list of attendees at the Council of Nicaea, included by Theodore Lector in the Historia Ecclesiasticae Tripartite Epitome, written about between 510 to 515. So this guy says he was there. A single offhand mention of Nicholas of Myra also occurs in the biography of another saint, St. Nicholas of Sion, who apparently took the name Nicholas to honor him. Sounds a bit dubious. Nicholas of Sion. Sounds like you might have been hiding out from the law. The life of St. Nicholas of Sion, written around 250 years after Nicholas of Myra's death, briefly mentions Nicholas of Sion visiting Nicholas's tomb to pay homage to him. According to Jeremy Seal, the fact that Nicholas had a tomb that could be visited serves as the almost solitary definitive proof that he was a real historical figure. So we're going on the basis of a imitation Nicholas going to his tomb, and this tomb being the proof that he actually existed. So this whole idea of St. Nicholas is really propped up in a lot of ways by tradition and imagination, and not a lot of substantiation. In his treatise, De Statu Animarum Post Mortem, the theologian Eustratius of Constantinople cites St. Nicholas of Myra's miracle of the three generals. We always get the three, right, as evidence that souls may work independent from the body. Eustratius credits a lost life of St. Nicholas as his source. Nearly all sources of Eustratius references date from the late 4th century to the early 5th century, indicating the life of St. Nicholas, to which he refers, is probably written during this time period, shortly after Nicholas's death. The earliest complete account of Nicholas's life that has survived to the present is A Life of St. Nicholas, written in the early 9th century by Michael the Archimandrite, nearly 500 years after his probable death. That's a long period of time, right? We're in the midst of time and myth here by the time Michael the Archimandrite comes around to write the biopic of Nicholas. Despite its extremely late date, Michael the Archimandrite life of St. Nicholas is believed to heavily rely on older written sources and oral traditions. The identity and reliability of these sources, however, remains uncertain. Catholic historian D.L. Can and medievalist Charles W. Jones both consider Michael the Archimandrite's life the only account of St. Nicholas that is likely to contain any historical truth. Joan Lendering, a Dutch historian of classical antiquity, notes that Michael the Archimandrite's life does not contain a conversion narrative, which was unusual for saints' lives of the period when it was written. He therefore argues that it is possible Michael the Archimandrite may have been relying on a source written before conversion narratives became popular, which would be a positive indication of the source's reliability. He notes that many of the stories recounted by Michael the Archimandrite closely resemble stories told about the first century AD Neo-Pythagorean philosopher Apollonius of Tyana in the Life of Apollonius of Tyana, an eight-volume biography written in the early 3rd century by the Greek writer Philostratus. It was not unusual for Christian saints to adapt older stories of pagan cults, as Apollonius' hometown of Tyana was not far from Myra. Lendering contends that many popular stories about Apollonius may have become attached to St. Nicholas. So now we have a crossover, right, of Apollonius and St. Nicholas. So let's get into his background and then this whole idea that St. Nicholas was a jolly old chap who was very generous and gives us the foundation of giving at Christmas. Accounts of St. Nicholas's life agree on the essence of his story, but modern historians disagree regarding how much of the story is actually rooted in historical fact. Traditionally, Nicholas was born in the city of Patara, Lycia, Pamphylia, a port on the Mediterranean Sea in Asia Minor in the Roman Empire, to a wealthy family of Greek Christians. According to some accounts, his parents were named Epiphanius and Johanna, but according to others, they were named Theophanes and Nana or Nova. Hey, we got a Nova sighting in chat. In some accounts, Nicholas's uncle was the bishop of the city of Myra, also in Lycia. Recognizing his nephew's calling, Nicholas's uncle ordained him as a priest. All right, here we go. So we got travels, which are very Sagittarian, right? It's very Sagittarian, and generosity, which is very Sagittarian. After his parents died from an epidemic, which happened back in the day, Nicholas said to have distributed their wealth to the poor. In his most famous exploit, which is first attested in Michael the Archimandrite's Life of St. Nicholas, Nicholas heard of a devout man who'd once been wealthy, but had lost all his money due to the plotting and envy of Satan. The man could not afford proper dowries for his 3 daughters. This meant that they would remain unmarried and probably in absence of other possible employment before to become prostitutes. Hearing of the girl's plight, Nicholas decided to help them out. But being too modest to help the family in public or to save them the humiliation of accepting charity, he went to the house under the cover of night and threw a purse filled with gold coins through the window opening into the house. So this is kind of the first example of the charity and gift giving at Christmas, or at least kind of as it relates to St. Nicholas. Again, it's a very Sagittarian thing to do, right? We look at somebody like Robin Hood, who's a very Sagittarian figure. You know, he has a bow and an arrow, which is very Sagittarian, and he steals from the rich and he gives to the poor. Again, Sagittarius, right? Okay. The father immediately arranged a marriage for his first daughter, and after her wedding, Nicholas threw a second bag of gold through the same window late at night. So they got 2 nights in a row. According to Michael, the Archimandrite's account, after the second daughter was married, the father stayed awake for at least 2 nights and caught St. Nicholas in the same act of charity toward the third daughter. The father fell on his knees thanking him, and Nicholas ordered him not to tell anyone about the gifts. The scene of Nicholas' secret gift giving is one of the most popular scenes in Christian devotional art, appearing in icons and frescoes from across Europe, although depictions vary depending on time and place. Nicholas is often wearing a cowl, while the daughters are typically shown in bed dressed in their night clothes. Many renderings contain a cypress tree or a cross-shaped cupola. So these are scenes of St. Nicholas here, and these are the tales of St. Nicholas. And somewhere in there is the golden dowries bestowed upon the 3 daughters. So again, we have generosity, right? Generosity is part of the codec. Okay. The historicity of this incident is disputed. Of course, they are. Adam C. English argues for a historical kernel to the legend, noting the story's early attestation, as well as the fact that no similar stories were told about any other Christian saints. Jonah Lendering, who also argues for the story's authenticity, notes that a similar story is told in Philostratus' life of Apollonius of Tyana, in which Apollonius gives money to an impoverished father, but posits that Michael the Archimandrite's account is markedly different. Philostratus does not mention the fate of the daughters, and in his story, Apollonius' generosity is purely motivated out of sympathy for the father. In Michael the Archimandrite's account, however, St. Nicholas is instead expressly stated to be motivated by a desire to save the daughters from being sold into prostitution. He argues that this desire to help women is most characteristic of 4th century Christianity due to the prominent role women played in the early Christian movement, rather than Greco-Roman paganism of the Christianity of Michael the Archimandrite and Mandrite's time in the 9th century, by which point the position of women had drastically declined. So Nicholas was pro-woman. He was pro-woman. Nicholas might have been a feminist. Nicholas is also said to have visited the Holy Land. The ship, now this is an important part here, because the ship mythology is going to come up later in the story, which is in and of itself very Piscean, right? The ship he was on was nearly destroyed by a terrible storm, but he rebuked the waves, causing the storm to subside. Thus, Nicholas became venerated as the patron saint of sailors and travelers. That really encompasses Pisces and Sagittarius, doesn't it? It encompasses his birthday, 3/15, which is traditionally the Ides of March, and his day, St. Nicholas Day, which was yesterday, December 6th, which is travelers and Sagittarius and seeing the world. So that's really fascinating. And we can see the crossover between astrology, mythology, legend, and lore. While in Palestine, Nicholas is said to have lived in a crypt near Bethlehem, where the nativity of Jesus is believed to have taken place. Over the crypt where Nicholas is believed to have lived now stands the Church of St. Nicholas in Beit Jala, a Christian town of which Nicholas is the patron saint. So if you go to Israel, you could go to Beit Jala, a Christian town, and that's the town of St. Nicholas, because it said that he lived over the nativity, to have lived in a crypt. He lived in a crypt. In a crypt. Man, that's commitment. After visiting the Holy Land, Nicholas returned to Myra. The bishop of Myra, who had succeeded Nicholas's uncle, had recently died, and the priest of the city had decided that the first priest to enter the church that morning would be made bishop. Nicholas went to the church and prayed, and therefore proclaimed the new bishop. How about that? He is said to have been imprisoned and tortured during the great persecution under the Emperor Diocletian, but was released under the orders of the Emperor Constantine the Great, who reestablished Christianity as the rule of the land in Constantinople. This story sounds plausible, but is not attested in the earliest sources and is therefore unlikely to be historical. So again, through I mean, this is a long time ago. You have all these different sources and stories and tales that come in to create this image of St. Nicholas, who becomes venerated and popularized, much more venerated and popularized during any other, almost any other saint. Well, I mean, there's a lot of popular, but this guy's, I mean, he turned into fucking Santa Claus. That's how popular he was. One of the earliest attested stories of St. Nicholas is one in which he saves 3 innocent men from execution. We've heard this before. It was the 3 daughters who were going to be put into prostitution, but because they had the dowry, he could marry those daughters off, and they would live lives as chaste women and wives of decent men, these versus being turned out on the streets. According to Michael, the archimandrite, 3 innocent men were condemned to death by Governor Eustathius. As they were about to be executed, Nicholas appeared. He just appeared, pushed the executioner's sword to the ground, released them from their chains, and angrily chastised a juror who had accepted a bribe. According to Jonah Lendering, the story directly parallels an earlier story in Philostratus' life of Apollonius of Tyana. So there seems to be some crossover here between Nicholas and Apollonius of Tyana. I think we're starting to kind of get a kind of what's sort of a morphine effect of these two characters, in which Apollonius prevents the execution of a man falsely condemned of banditry. Michael the Archimandrite also tells another story in which the consul Ablabius accepted a bribe to put 3 famous generals to death, in spite of their actual innocence. St. Nicholas appeared to Constantine and Ablabius in dreams, informing Constantine of the truth and frightening Ablabius into releasing the generals for fear of hell. He had Krampus right behind him. Later versions of the story are more elaborate, interweaving the 2 stories together. According to one version, Emperor Constantine sent 3 of his most trusted generals, named Ursus, Nepotianos, and Herpelion, to put down a rebellion in Phrygia. However, a storm forced them to take refuge in Myra. Unbeknownst to the generals who were in the harbor, their soldiers further inland were fighting with the local merchants and engaging in looting and destruction. Nicholas confronted the generals for allowing their soldiers to misbehave. The generals brought an end to the looting. Immediately after, the soldiers had returned to their ships. Nicholas heard word of the 3 innocent men about to be executed, and the 3 generals aided him in stopping the execution. Eustathius attempted to flee on his horse, but Nicholas stopped his horse and chastised him for his corruption. Eustathius, under the threat of being reported directly to the emperor, repented of his corrupt ways. Afterward, the generals succeeded in ending the rebellion and were promoted by Constantine to an even higher status. The generals' enemies, however, slandered them to the council Ablabius, telling him that they had not really put down the revolt, but instead encouraged their own soldiers to join it. The generals' enemies also bribed Ablabius, any of the 3 generals in prison. Nicholas then made his dream appearances, and the 3 generals were set free. So Nicholas has some miraculous powers. Here's another one. This is one where I think he frees the children who were pickled and brined. One story tells how during a terrible famine, a malicious butcher lured 3 little children into his house, where he killed them, placing the remains in a barrel to cure, planning to sell them off as ham. Somehow I see this as being completely plausible and true up to this point. Nicholas, visiting the region to care for the hungry, saw through the butcher's lies and resurrected the pickled children by making the sign of the cross. If one of your friends gets pickled over the holiday season, just make them the sign of the cross, and they'll be fine. They'll be fine. They'll be able to drive. You can take care of your pickled friends that way. Jonah Lendering opines that the story is without any historical value. Adam C. English notes that the story of the resurrection of the pickled children is a late medieval addition to the legendary biography of St. Nicholas, and that it is not found in any of the earliest lives. Although this story seems bizarre and horrifying to modern audiences, it was tremendously popular throughout the late Middle Ages and the modern early period, and widely beloved by ordinary folk. Oh my God. Oh, please tell the story. Tell the story about the 3 little ones that got pickled. We want to hear that one again. And how St. Nicholas came in and saved them. Yes, yes, yes. Pickle babies, pickle babies. Eventually, the scene became so widely reproduced. Oh, look at this. Look at this. It was depicted in stained glass windows, wood panel paintings, tapestries, and frescoes. Eventually, the scene became so widely produced that rather than showing the whole scene, artists began to merely depict St. Nicholas with the three naked children and a wooden barrel at his feet. He saved them. He resurrected them out of their butchered sea of brine. According to English, eventually people had forgotten or never learned the story. Tondar, you could tell that story to your little one. Keep up the tradition. If you got grandkids over the holidays, be sure to whip out the story of St. Nicholas and the three blind little children. That'll go over real well. According to English, eventually people who had forgotten or never learned the story began misinterpreting representations of it. That St. Nicholas was shown with children led people to conclude the patron saint was the saint of children, which he does become, by the way. Meanwhile, the fact that he was shown with the barrel led people to conclude that he was the patron saint of brewers. But that makes sense because brewers create beer, which makes one jovial. And if you drink enough of it, it will increase your midsection to Jupiterian proportions. According to another story, during a great famine that Myra experienced in 311-312, a ship was in the port at anchor, loaded with wheat for the emperor in Constantinople. Nicholas invited the sailors to unload part of the wheat to help him in the time of need. The sailors at first disliked the request because the wheat had to be weighed accurately and delivered to the emperor. Only when Nicholas promised them that they would not suffer any loss for their consideration did the sailors agree. When they arrived later in the capital, they made a surprising find. The weight of the load had not changed. Although the wheat removed in Myra was enough for 2 full years, it could even be used for sowing. This Nicholas, he had some game. So this gets into all the places where he's got his remains, right? And they've done scientific analysis on his stuff. So here we go. In 2004, at the University of Manchester, researchers Caroline Wilkinson and Franco Introno reconstructed the saint's face based on Martino's examination. Their view of the data revealed that the historical St. Nicholas was 5'6" in height and had a broken nose, which had partially healed, revealing that the injury had been suffered ante-mortem. Somebody clipped him after he died. The broken nose appeared to conform with hagiographical reports that St. I guess before Antiprete, that's my bad, had been beaten and tortured during the Diocletianic persecution. The facial reconstruction was produced by Carolyn Wilkinson, the University of Manchester. It was shown on BBC Two, The Real Face of Santa. Shall we take a look at that? Where is it? In 2014 at the Face Lab of John Moores University in Liverpool. Where's the real face of Santa? They produced an updated reconstruction of St. Nicholas's face. Pretty interesting. In 2017, 2 researchers from Oxford University, Professor Tom Higgin and Dr. George Kazan, radiocarbon dated a fragment of a pelvis claimed to belong to St. Nicholas. The fragment originally came from a church in Lyon, France, and at the time of testing was in the possession of Father Dennis O'Neill, a priest from St. Martha Bethany Church in Illinois. Now, how did he get that shit? The results of the radiocarbon dating confirmed that the pelvis dates to the 4th century AD, around the same time St. Nicholas would have died, and is not a medieval forgery. The bone is one of the oldest the Oxford team had ever examined. All right. This gets into St. Nicholas being a saint for the Greeks and sailors as well. So pretty interesting, right? Pretty interesting. Let's see. Devotional akathis and canons have been composed in his honor and are frequently chanted by the faithful as they ask for his intercession. He is mentioned in the liturgy of preparation during the Divine Liturgy, the Eastern Orthodox Eucharist, and during the all-night vigil. Many Orthodox churches will have his icon, even if they are not named after him. In Oriental Orthodoxy, the Coptic Church observes the departure of St. Nicholas on 10 Kiak, or 10 Tassas in Ethiopia, which corresponds to the Julian calendar's December 6th, or the Gregorian calendar is December 19th, which kind of gets into that changeover, crossover period between late fall and the first night of winter, right? The winter solstice coming in 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd. And those dates float a little bit, especially when you get into some of the older calendars. Nicholas had a reputation for secret gift giving, such as putting coins in the shoes of those who left them out for him, a practice celebrated on his feast day. For those who still observe the Julian calendar, the celebration currently takes place 13 days later than it happens with the Gregorian calendar revised Julian. So December 19th, 6th, 19th. So the Julian calendar is ahead by 13 days. Anyway, there's what he looks like. And he has a popular Russian and Serbian icons. And in 1948, Benjamin Britten composed a cantata, St. Nicholas, on a text by Eric Crozier, which covers the saint's legendary life. This guy's like fucking Indiana Jones. In a dramatic sequence of events, a tenor soloist appears as St. Nicholas with a mixed choir, boy singer, strings, piano duet, organ, and percussion. All right. So that is your deep dive on St. Nicholas and his penchant for gift giving and where it all comes from. Very interesting stuff. All right, let's get into we'll go back here. All right. So that was St. Nicholas, Sag Jupiter. And here he is with two little girls. And I did a little cut and paste there. Right. And those are his life days. And he's looking, this is looking a bit Victorian here. And we're starting to see the early features of Santa Claus begin to take shape. Right. He's kind of morphing a bit into Santa Claus. And what's interesting is the fact that he brings oranges and pomegranates. Now, these are fruits that wouldn't be growing in the Northern Hemisphere during the time that St. Nicholas would make his journey. So he's coming from another part of the world. All right, here we go. This is St. Nicholas and Black Pete. Now, St. Nicholas and Black Pete, they're like 48 hours. And that's like Nick Nolte over here, and Black Pete is Eddie Murphy. But what we're dealing with is we're dealing with Jupiter and Saturn. Now, I think probably since Holland has plenty of refugees, they don't need their local populace to go into blackface and play Black Pete. And it's not uncommon for children to, it's almost like a Halloween costume, although they don't do it at Halloween. They do it around Christmas time, and they'll put black soot and ash around their face. And Black Pete is almost like a pirate. He's got a pirate vibe. And then this leads us into Santa Claus, which leads us into ultimately Santa Claus. Why don't we take a look at Black Pete? Let me see if I can find it here. So this is where we get into Santa Claus. We're starting to merge closer to Santa Claus here. Can you see this? Now, Krampus comes out of this German tradition, right? So now we're seeing this sort of fusion of this Krampus-like character with Black Pete along with St. Nicholas and this whole idea of Santa Claus. So again, this is from Wikipedia. Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas, is a legendary figure based on Saint Nicholas. So we're kind of getting closer to the Santa Claus figure. The patron saint of children. Other Dutch names for the figure include De Sint or De Sint, De Goedsint, De Good Heiligman, alluding to the historical reputation of the saint who can help you find a good life partner, the good marriage man. Many descendants and cognates of Sinterklaas or Saint Nicholas in other languages are also used in the Low Countries, nearby regions, and former Dutch colonies. You know, I proposed one night, my first marriage, on Christmas Eve. Who'd have thought? I was I was I was I was going to I was going to church on Christmas Eve, and it was at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, and I happened to be high on ecstasy. It seemed like the right thing to do. What could I say? The spirit of Saint Nicholas had invaded me. Word to the wise out there. I would avoid proposing on ecstasy. Just to let you know, it's the after effects settle in about 3 or 4 days later, and then you get to the what have I done phase of the operation. So here we go. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. The feast of Sinterklaas celebrates the name day of Saint Nicholas, 6th December. The Sinterklaas feast is celebrated annually with the giving of gifts on St. Nicholas Eve, 5 December. It's also Krampus's Day. In the Netherlands and on the morning of St. Nicholas Day, the 6th of December, Belgium, Luxembourg, Western Germany, Northern France, French Flanders, Lorraine, Alsace, and Artois. Alsace was where I was born. The tradition is also celebrated in some territories of the former Dutch Empire, including Aruba. Well, it was celebrated here. We became an outpost of the Dutch Empire. Sinterklaas is one of the sources of the popular Christmas icon, Santa Claus. That's right. This is now we're starting to have more of a Santa Claus-y kind of vibe, right? He has a long red cape or chasuble over traditional white bishop's alb and sometimes red stole, a red meter, and a ruby ring, and a gold-colored crozier. All right, so let's talk about Zwart Piet, Black Pete. Sinterklaas is assisted by Zwart Piet or Black Pete, a helper dressed in Moorish attire and in a black painted face. Zwart Piet first appeared as the nameless servant of St. Nicholas and his servant published in 1850 by the Amsterdam school teacher Jan Schenkman. However, the tradition appears to date back for at least as far as the early 19th century. So we're talking about the early 1800s. Zwart Piet's colorful dress is based on the 16th century noble attire with ruff, that's the lace collar, and a feather cap. He is typically depicted carrying a bag which contains candy for the children, which he tosses around, a tradition supposedly originating in the story of St. Nicholas saving the 3 young girls. So St. Nicholas picks up, a sidekick. St. Nicholas is Batman, St. Pete's or Black Pete's is Robin. Traditionally, also carry a birch rod, a chimney sweep's broom made of willow branches used to spank children who've been naughty. Now we've got the Krampus crossover, right? Black Pete, you don't want to get on Black Pete's bad side. So again, Black Pete he's Saturnian, right? He's dark, right? He may have some candy, but he'll rough you up as well, right? Black Pete will rough you up, just like Krampus will rough you up. Again, very, very Saturnian. You get the hard lessons from Saturn. Some of the older Sinterklaas songs make mention of naughty children being put into Zwart Piet's bag and being taken back to Spain. You will see this also in the Krampus illustrations, where Krampus is. I've got some pictures which I'm going to show you. Krampus is a child abductor, right? Like, so if you were a kid and you were growing up in the 1700s or the 1800s, 1800s, 1900s. You wanted to be good because you wanted a nice visit from Santa Claus. You didn't want a visit from Krampus or Black Pete. Now, would you? Because you may not even be wind up living in that house. Oh, where did Walter go? Walter, he went with Black Pete. He lives with Black Pete now. Have you guys seen the new Kevin Hart commercial where he plays this little elf? Doesn't he's like Black Pete? Kevin Hart in this new commercial for Verizon where he plays this he's like Black Pete. Except now there's no Santa. It's just him. This is what DEI has done. DEI has moved Zwart Piet ahead of Santa. Now it's just Zwart Piet played by Kevin Hart. Over the years, many stories have been added. Zwart Piet has developed into a valuable assistant to the absent-minded saint in modern adaptations for television. Sinterklaas has developed a Zwart Piet for every function, such as head Piet, like this is where you get your elves, right? Head Piet, navigation Piet, that's to navigate the steamboat from Spain to the Netherlands. Presents Piet, to wrap all the gifts, and acrobatic Piet, to climb roofs and chimneys. Traditionally, Zwart Piet's face is said to have been black because he is a Moor from Spain. Today, some children are told that his face is blackened with soot because he has to climb through the chimneys to deliver gifts. So Santa and Zwart Piet, this is interesting. We'll go back here. He traditionally arrives in a steamboat from Spain. Not even like a sleigh with reindeer, a steamboat from Spain. And he does ride a white horse. In the Netherlands, the televised Sinterklaas specials have named the horse. Until 2019, Sinterklaas rode Amerigo. Where we heard that before? Amerigo is America, who was pensioned, i.e. died, and replaced with a horse called O So Snel, Oh So Fast, after a passage in a well-known Sinterklaas song. In Belgium, the horse is named Slecht Weer Vandaag, meaning bad weather today, or Mooi Weer Vandaag, nice weather today. Sinterklaas carries a big red book, which traditionally records whether each child has been good or naughty in the past year. So Santa Claus has AI and surveillance. He knows. He knows where your name is in that book. But it's really interesting that he comes from the South. And he himself is white and adorned with a silver beard, silver frock, or locks rather. But he brings with him Zwart Piet, or Black Pete, who literally is a Moor. And they bring with them fruit from the South. That's where you get this tradition of oranges and pomegranates coming into things like stockings. I used to get oranges in my stocking when I was a kid. So it's not a it's not a tradition. I mean, I don't know. Maybe some people still do that. So when we get into Black Pete, now we're getting and there's Black Pete right there. Now we're getting into this idea of Jupiter and Saturn and Sagittarius and Capricorn, because Black Pete has a lot more in common with Krampus than he does with Sinterklaas or Santa Claus. Now here we go. This is the boat. This is the steamboat. Now this looks like fun. And you get all the helpers. Look at all those Black Petes or black helpers. Look at this. I mean, how have they not shut this down? I think it has to do with the fact that that it's probably they've taken on so many new people that they can just use the new people now as the Black Petes or whatever Petes, right? The navigation Pete, the toy Pete, whatever. It's so fascinating. This is like a precursor of things to come. This is prophecy. this this was this wasn't a sea fairy bearing gifts. This was a message from the future. Dutch people, this is what you have coming. I'm sorry, I don't like to laugh at my own jokes, but I think this is kind of funny, right? Maybe this is all part of a psychological operation where they were just softening up the Dutch so that when the ships from North Africa arrive, oh look, it's Santa's helpers. They can't be all bad. They are the helpers of Saint Nicholas. There he is. Black Pete. All right, let's go back here. So there they are together. We're going Jupiter, joviality, largesse, gifts, giving, and then we have the image of Saturn here. Dark, carries a switch, will hit the children every now and then, will take them away, right? This is very much a Krampus-like character right there. So this is pretty interesting. This is where we get into Odin and Santa Claus or Saint Nicholas. Because I feel like, okay, is Odin a representation of Jupiter as like a creator god? And I would say yes, that Odin occupies the same territory as Zeus. And for me, Zeus is Jupiter, right? It is the largest of the planetary bodies, right? And Zeus had his own, Zeus was Saturnian, but he would go down to Earth and live a bit of a debauched life. So Odin and the Wild Hunt has a lot to do with also this notion of like the holidays and feasting, which I think is really, really interesting. And I was looking for a connection between Odin and Jupiter as relates to St. Nicholas and Santa Claus, and this Jovian, right, jovial character. And I found this really interesting, borderline academic edition. This is from Kerwin R.S. Rowlandson. So shout out. This is on Odin as Jupiter in the Icelandic rune poem. So this is a rune poem, and Jupiter is actually mentioned here in this poem. So what he does is he goes through all of this entire manuscript, and we can see the runes, in play here. So I'm going to read this, and it will give you this crossover between Odin and Jupiter and St. Nicholas and Santa Claus. And again, which is part of this mythological amalgamation. So he's writing from the first person. It's always nice to be vindicated. This is a page from a manuscript, AM 687 D4, which constitutes the oldest presentations of the Icelandic rune poem. That is to say, the occasionally rather cryptic explication of just what each rune is to mean. The relevant word for our interest I have highlighted in red. It's right there. Okay. It occurs in the fourth line, detailing what the Icelandics termed os, and which in the Elder Futhark is ansus. That is signals, by the way. To say that the Asir rune, or the spear of the divine, I phrase it thus, not only due to the spear god himself and the archaic rune shape, but also given its continuance in the Anglo-Saxon sphere as a rather direct ash, the famed spear wood so prominent even amidst the Greeks. What is the text of the line? Per R.I. Page's rendering, where due to the age of the manuscript, some semi-illegible text has had to be enhanced, as expressed in the square brackets. Ower aldingator oak asgardiz Olaf Jar, Valahar, Visa, Jupiter, Odavite, or in translation, and with my own annotations to draw out particular points of interest, Os is the aged Gator, god, and ruler, prince of Asgard. Interestingly, the term used, Jofor, is actually from the root, which means boar, potentially carrying toward an archaic Indo-European tradition around the boar and its position in the fight, also seen in the Vedas. And chief of Valhalla, the term used, Vizi, and the CF, the vizier used in the Runologia version of the poem, I would take to be descended from Proto-Germanic visas, which is to say wise, itself from Proto-Indo-European. Wed, which means to see. Between PJ, Viaz, and the term used in the manuscript, there may be a PG visona, which means to point out, to direct, and which should therefore posit visor as an effective functional correlate for Latin dictator, from pi dec, to point out, whence to teach, vindication, vendence, decocion or decosune, justice, wisdom, and leadership. Hence, Emperor Jupiter. Now, as for why I've chosen to render Odavite as emperor, I'm in fact meaning it in the more archaic Roman sense of the term, imperator or war leader. Oder refers to a sharp point of a weapon, the proverbial tip of the spear, we may say. So he goes through all of this and basically gets to the end here. And what he's able to determine is that Odin is Jupiter. Why is it with this particular formulation of the Icelandic poem, rune poem cross identifies Odin with Jupiter? Well, the answer is reasonably apparent. By the time the manuscript in question was written about 500 years ago, Iceland had been Christianized for some centuries. Explicating elements of the authentic Old Norse tradition entirely in their own terms would be an exercise in difficulty, whereas classical forms and understandings were part of the high cultural milieu of most Northern Europe to varying degrees, and even so in a Christianized context. Speaking of Jove would mean something. It is a referential touchstone, or if you like, beacon upon which to hang one's hat wide. Now, at this point, somebody down there in the cheap seats, presumably just itching to bring up the long-standing equation of Odin with Mercury via the Interpretatio Romana approach, and therefore claiming that, of course, this vitiates any suggestion of Odin as Jupiter, or more pointedly, that he is Dias Pitar, the Sky Father. And we must always remember that per the Vedas, Dias is Rudra, except it has been discussed quite exhaustively that identification of Odin as Mercury is not what it seems. It's a Roman writing about a foreign group and making a semi-educated guess as to where he thinks the lead god of that people might fit in. Some of his statements, like the worship of Hercules, who we may quite reasonably infer to be Thor, make sense. Others, not so much. It must be cast over with a critical eye. So we want to get to the money shot, right? It's down here. Yet it would be most curious indeed to attempt to assert the claim of Odin as Lord of the glorious ancestral dead would somehow be Christian defamation rather than an eminently logical and reasonable interpretatio Romana that does not actually state something accurately apt about Odin's role within the cosmos and the cosmology. Similarly, I'd be at a loss to explain why a linkage of Odin with Jupiter would be made with such defamatory intent in mind by the late Icelandic chronicler who compiled the rune poem. It is simply as it appears, a reasonable direct statement of classical equivalency as they understood it, and most importantly, one which accords strongly with the evidence we've exhaustively compiled from a comparative Indo-European perspective elsewhere. Never let it be said that occasional insights of brilliant truth cannot somehow come down to earth, even in later times as text. Os Algin Gator, Algin Gautor, OK Asgaros, Jofer, OK Vahar, Visi, Jupiter, Odaviti. So Odin is Jupiter, right? And so the feast of Odin, which is its own thing, is very much related to this time of year, and also Santa Claus. So it's the, let me get back here just one second. Where are we? Oh, right here. Yes. Odin and the Wild Hunt. Odin and the Wild Hunt. So again, this is from Wikipedia. And this has a Germanic tradition, a tradition in Europe. Jacob Grimm of the Brothers Grimm published a piece on Odin and the Wild Hunt. And it gets retold also in Iberia, in England. And then these different people come into play. King Arthur, right? And so here's a modern influence right here on Santa Claus. The role of Wotan's wild hunt during the Yuletide period has been theorized to have influenced the development of the Dutch Christmas figure Sinterklaas, and by extension, his American counterpart, Santa Claus, in a variety of facets. These include his long white beard and his gray horse for nightly rides. So there's a crossover between Odin, Santa Claus, the horse, right? In Sinterklaas, right? We have Saint Nicholas on a horse as he's Sinterklaas. So again, the horse, even the horse is Sagittarian, right? So there's this interesting mythological confluence between Odin and Sinterklaas and Santa Claus, and all three of them sharing Jupiter and Sagittarius as an astrological touchstone. Okay. I'm going to give you some of these images. To me, this one was really interesting. And there are images, comparative images of Jupiter and Odin, and very Santa Claus, clean them up a little bit, put some red on them, a little cap with a fuzzy ball, and you got a Santa, right? You can see how these myths sort of breathe into each other and take on aspects of local traditions and also these kind of archetypal stories. Okay, so let's go back in time. And these are very odd photos, right? So this is an early version of Santa Claus. Not looking very Santa Claus. He's looking more Saturnian, isn't he? He's looking more like the fucking Grim Reaper than he is Santa Claus. And these are all from like the late 1800s and early 1900s. And here's Santa again, looking very Capricornian, hunched over. He's got a cane. It's not quite like a scythe, but he's looking very Capricornian. Capricorn tends to be gaunt. It's not as full-bodied and robust, right? Capricorn's more about austerity. And then here you have some other versions. Santa getting a little bit closer here, but also looking like he's about to rob a train somewhere in the Midwest on the way to Nevada. And then I don't know about this Santa. He's looking a little creepy, still very dark. You don't get a lot of sense of joy, even though it says Joyeux Noël. Do those look very joyous? No, they look very Saturnine. So again, it's this weird blending between these two traditions, and Saturnalia does certainly come into play. Here we have Saint Nick. So here's Saint Nick, and it looks like an early version of Santa, maybe. And then we've got these Krampus figures, and they're all posing together. Right. And it's really, I think it's really interesting that you have these this ecclesiastical figure and these demons will do his bidding, right? I mean, we see like another version of that with all the little, the Zwarts, right? And like, it's really, really odd. But again, it's also very Sagittarian and very, And even in the case of the bishop or St. Nicholas, we come into a kind of a Capricornian figure as well, as like a lawmaker and a lawgiver, but also one who is not taking things away. He's actually giving people things, right? He's giving people second chances, the redemption of life, gold coins, presents from Spain, in his ship with his trusty navigator, Dark Pete. Here's another Krampus, and he's got children. Now, these are the birch bundle. This is the birch bundle that Krampus has to whip the children who've been bad. And now Krampus is taking off with the children. This is like a broom. Krampus has had a busy night, right? And it's like the theft of innocence. Krampus is a child abductor. And this was part of the mythology. This was part of the lore. Like if you were a kid and you saw that shit, would you want to be on the back of Krampus's switch? I don't think so. So, they would just bring Krampus up. Be the heat of the summer. You could be acting out. Do you know who's watching you? Krampus. Krampus has an eye on you right now. He may come for you during the holidays if you do not behave. However, St. Nicholas, Santa Claus will reward you if you're a good boy. What does that mean? We've been too jaded to ask the delicate questions of what that means. Now, this I found to be really interesting. This is almost like a ghostly Santa. This is a weird photo. So they're playing with an early double exposure. And I think the picture is it's really odd, right? Because you've got like, is that a real fucking parrot or is that a toy? I don't know. And then you have this mother who's asleep. And now here's this ghostly figure, like this double exposed, but he's not really looking. I mean, he's getting closer to Santa, but he's almost like a ghost, right? And he appears as this ghost who, brings gifts for this sleeping little girl. Like it's a kind of a creepy photo, but I admire the fact that they're playing with double exposure and trying to get that in the frame and getting this sort of phantasmagoric version of Santa, which I think is really cool. Now down here, you see Krampus again. And Saint Nicholas, he's looking in. This is from Paris. This is a kind of a photo engraved. It's like a photo, like an illustration. These are photos of kids. These are photos of babies that they've put in sort of this ink and pen drawing, right? And there's St. Nicholas looking in, and you have this golden globe. It's almost like a crystal ball. So no Christmas tree in the center of everything. You have this crystal ball, and it's emanating almost a supernatural power. And there are all these kids around. You got some dogs, and you have Krampus taking off with two of the kids. And St. Nicholas is looking in, and I guess these kids got the toys. One got a little dog, one got this, one got that. Maybe this little girl got the crystal ball. I don't know what this baby got. I guess he got lucky that he wasn't taken away by Krampus. And these kids got this little Santa Claus over here. So they got all their little toys. These kids must have been bad. And Santa Claus was looking over it, like giving the papal blessing. So it's funny how from a psychological function, right, these two symbols of Saturn and Jupiter work together to create this kind of ectomorph of order in the hearts and minds of these children. Because if you saw that shit, would you want to take off with, I don't know, maybe if you were the bored housewife, you'd want to take off with Krampus. But if you were a kid, no way, man. There's no way. So when does it all change? When do we have it all come together? It's when Haddon Sandblom, who was hired by Coca-Cola to do the modern day depiction of Santa Claus, brings it all together. Right. But this is in the 1920s. And I think it's like 1928, 1929, if I'm not mistaken. And Santa becomes associated with Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola wanted people to drink Coca-Cola during the wintertime. They thought, well, it's just, no, there's no connection between snow and Coca-Cola. Keep your minds out of the gutter. They decided that they just wanted to sell more Coke during the wintertime. And so Haddon Sundblom was the guy who creates it. And what I think is really interesting about, and we're going to get into his chart a little bit, what I think is really interesting about the depiction of Santa is you can see him. Like he is in the damn Santa, like his spirit, right? You can, like, he put a beard on this guy, put a beard and a mustache and dress him up in red. That guy is freaking Santa Claus. So he put his own spirit into Santa Claus. And Santa Claus becomes the amalgamation. He's the focal point, right? Santa Claus is Saint Nicholas, he's Sinterklaas, right? Now, all of a sudden, Krampus or Black Pete is more than likely Coca-Cola. This is what's happened to Black Pete. He's become carbonated. You know, if you have gas or the Krampus, you should drink some Coca-Cola. That'll help you out. So it's not like they've completely ditched Krampus or Black Pete. They just have it now carbonated and in a bottle. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And here's Santa with this little mug of Coca-Cola. Which says drink. This is really done to sell Coca-Cola during the wintertime. However, all that said, we have to take a look at Haddon Sundblom's chart. Now, I don't have his birth time because he was born in 1899, and he grew up around all these very northern festivities, right? But what I find interesting about his chart is, number one, he's a Cancer. He's born 1 degree Cancer. So right near the summer solstice, the exact opposite of Christmas, right? Like he's on the other side of the winter solstice. So it's almost like he is I don't want to use the word repository. Yeah, repository. He's like a repository of the energies of the winter solstice. And he has Mercury in Cancer, and he has Venus, Pluto, and Neptune all in Gemini. So he's a bit of a trickster, like putting some of his facial features, which I believe he has, in the spirit of Santa. But check it out. He has Uranus, the moon, Saturn, and the true node all in Sagittarius, right? And it's at that true node at 29 degrees, which is almost right there, sitting bang on the winter solstice. It is the last outpost of Sagittarius. And with Saturn in Sagittarius, you get the Capricornian part, you get the Jupiterian part. They come together, and we have Cazimi, right? And we have the moon, which is the home. And it's the home in Sagittarius. So clearly he found a home away from his homeland, which was in Europe, and he wound up living in the United States, became a very well-known and very well-respected illustrator for Coca-Cola and a number of other companies. And he has Uranus and Sag retrograde as well. So to me, the spirit of Sagittarius and Santa Claus comes together through the illustration of Santa by Haddon Sundblom's astrological chart. The Cazimi of Saturn and the moon, Saturn being the representation of Capricorn, but here in the sign of Sagittarius, and connecting with things like the home and travel and just the spirit of Sagittarius personified. He gets it. He captures it. This is the beauty of astrology and art, right? This is astrology as living mythology through the pen and the paint and the ink and the shadow and the light of Haddon Sundblom. That is the personification of Saturn. That is the personification of Jove, and it's all right there. Remember that true node is heading in this direction, right? So it's going deeper into Sagittarius. It's just coming out of the baptismal waters of Capricorn. And so it's at its weakest and at its strongest, paradoxically, as it moves through the nodes. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed our little tour through Santa Claus and St. Nicholas and Satan and Krampus and Black Pete, a little Saturnalia. It's a fascinating fusion and amalgam of story and time. And when I look at it from this perspective, I actually enjoy the season more. I see it as kind of a living mythology where all of these other traditions come together. Some of them are really twisted. Some of them might be, pious but false. Some of them seem quite magical. Some of them are downright scary, but they're all part of the story that we celebrate during this time, none of which has much to do with the baby Jesus. But if you're going in for the miraculous, and look no further than St. Nicholas, as he's able to resurrect those three children, Pickled and Brine, and to save the lives of the three girls who are going to go into prostitution instead of being wedded off into reasonable families. All right, I hope you've enjoyed that. I do have our chart of the moment here, which we can get into. Give me 1 second. Oh, come on. All right, I'm going to have to get rid of this one. Okay, here we go. Let's see. Exit full screen. Okay, there we go. I guess somehow we managed to get into the full screen mode. All right. So let's take a look at now, and we'll get out of here. So we started at 9 p.m., a brisk 2 hours for all of you astro heads out there. All right, here we go. Mars, the great chariot in Sagittarius. Juno. Mars is still trying to Neptune, still trying to Saturn, right? So keep your wits about you. Defensive driving. I think there's a high degree of feeling generous. That's my sense here. Even though Mars-Saturn square isn't always generous, Mars-Neptune squares can be generous. Maybe you could wedge yourself out of not being generous and help somebody out here. That's the spirit of the season, right? This is the whole idea behind St. Nicholas. He's got plenty to give. So he's gonna pass it around. He's gonna spread it around. We've got Venus in Sagittarius. There's the Sun. So we've got a whole compendium. Mercury in 5 days, which will put us around the 12th. Will also be in Sagittarius. Mars will just be starting to peak out a little bit. So I'm not sure if all of them, but this is a super stellium right now in Sagittarius. And if you want to turn, if you're an affirmation person, okay, if you're an affirmation person or you're an energy person, this is a great time of year. This is great energy. We've got Juno, we've got Mars, we've got the Sun. Don't get too distracted with that Mars-Neptune square. I think it's really interesting. Well, let me get into this a little bit more, and then we're going to get into like some mundane stuff. But if you want, you would think, well, you really want to, like, if you want momentum in your life, is now the time to be doing it this time of year? I would say with these planets, yes. Why? Because it's attitudinal. It's all attitudinal. And what you want is the right mindset, want the right attitude, you want positivity. They're all part of the mix, especially with Juno there. So let's say you have a project that needs some um, fluffing up, or it's lagging a little bit, or even if you want to start something. Yes, I know that the moon is already full. Do you want to wait until the moon is in Sag? I don't know. It's conjunct Jupiter right now. Jupiter is the ruler of Sag, right? And it's in this grand trine with Mercury. So I think if you want to be starting something, this is a really good time. And it's all attitudinal. You want to be in the right mindset. You want to be positive. And it's easy to be very negative. There's a lot of negativity in the world. There's a lot of darkness in the world. But this is the time of year where the nights light up, right? We are surrounded by light. And that's part of the metaphor of the time that we're in. Even in the darkest time of the year, we are surrounded by light. And not just any light, but beautiful lights, lights of all colors, lights of the entire spectrum. And they're dazzling and they're magical. And even if, like, you didn't need a lot of money last night to go to Johnson City and take in the lights, right? And children, we're all children at heart too this time of year, right? So this is a time of year where if you want to gain some momentum with all this Sagittarian energy, it's there. It is there, and especially with this Jupiter Moon conjunction, trining Neptune, trining Saturn, trining Mercury. Really, really, I would say positive energy. And, why not be festive? This is one of those years with Christmas where I'd lay it out. I'd lay it out. I'd get into it. I'd get into it. The lights, maybe the stupid sweater, the goofy sweater, whatever you do, but do it in your own way. Create this sense of festivity, this sense that no matter how dark life can get, right? We're in a time of year where goodness and kindness and generosity can play a part of the story. And I know a lot of you, or some of you say, well, it shouldn't be seasonal, and I agree with you. But it's the nature of Sagittarius. It's the nature of being big, bountiful, larger than life. You want to get a dose of Sagittarius, spend about 20 minutes with Janine. You will be plugged into the Sagittarian circuit in a huge way. And you'll walk away feeling like you can do fucking anything. I guarantee you. So this is a very good time for momentum. Cultivate it. Cultivate it. Your presence of mind, your positivity. Be generous with yourself. Be generous with others. Be generous with the Holy Spirit. Like, hey, what's up? What do you want me to do? I'm ready. I'm ready for an adventure. I'm ready for an adventure. Let's go. Sign me up, boss. Right. But that's the kind of spirit we're talking about here. Yes, I know they're squares. Look, it's better to be over enthusiastic than, like, in football or sports, you can't teach hustle and energy. You can't teach it. You can't coach it. You either have it or you don't. You can teach some fundamentals, some techniques, those you can learn. So in football, one of the things is it's always better to get somebody who's like overly physical than somebody who is under physical. Because you can teach them how to dial back a little bit from being over physical. But the under physical guys, it's very hard to motivate. And you spend a lot of time trying to motivate them. So it's kind of like Sagittarius. It's better to be over enthusiastic than it is to be middling or average. So don't be average. Don't be middling. Allow yourself to be excited. And it's like you You are a candle, and the other person or the other people in your lives are candle as well. And you can light them up if you want. And maybe if you're down, somebody can come along and light your wick. Right? This is the season of light. How they do it? They do it in Judaism. You got the menorah and the lighting of the candles. I mean, you could be a light on a string or a light on the candle. It's the season of light. And with all this Sagittarius, I'm telling you, it's better to be over enthusiastic. Don't get lazy. Don't get lazy. You say, I'm going to do this, and then don't do it. You may want to keep to yourself what you're going to do, but generate that positivity. Generate the sense that anything could happen. A miracle could happen. Well, how about that? This is one of the things that when you look at the life of St. Nicholas, like they lived in a time of the miraculous, that saints could do these things, that these wild stories could happen, that all of a sudden God would intercede into the life of man through the abundance and largesse of a saint, right? Or the sacrifice of a saint. And we live in a time of what I would say would be anywhere between humorous cynicism to downright dour realism. And it feels like this idea of the magical and the possible, the miraculous, is something that it's a tradition we have to keep alive. We have to keep it alive. It's very easy for our light to be snuffed out during a time like this. And it doesn't mean that you have to be Pollyanna. In fact, it takes more work to be positive and enthusiastic during a time where the darkness seems to outweigh the light in a lot of ways, to obscure the light, to stay in that frame of reference. But you can do it. And just wait. Tomorrow the moon moves into Leo, comes in, starts trining, like Venus, the sun, Mars, Saturn, Neptune. Let the holidays begin. Let them begin. What do you want to do? What kind of magic are you capable of? What kind of abundance can you share with others? What kind of abundance can you share with yourself? This is the mindset. When I was younger, and to this day I still do it a bit, but I was younger and I lived in California. That was my goal, man. I was into making magic. Like wherever I could find it, I was gonna make magic. Kind of did that a little yesterday. I was moved. I was moved by this woman yesterday, and we were at the Johnson City Light Show, and there was this family. This is not a virtue signal. I'm just telling you, this is what I did. There was this family, and they were getting together to have a picture around this beautiful, multicolored Christmas tree, big, right? And it was two generations, husband, wife, mother, father. And the mother was in a walker, right? She's in a walker. And she had to get out of that walker. And she had to navigate some river rock, right? From the sidewalk to get to the tree. And I thought, they're lining up for a picture. So I said, hey, would you like me to take a picture? Oh, yeah, that would be great. I was moved by that woman. It's like, that little stretch of sidewalk to the tree, that was a journey. So I took their pictures, and I'm just sharing the story with you because that's what I'm talking about, right? Be on the lookout for magic. Be the person that sprinkles the magic dust into a situation. Don't force it, though. See, that's the thing about magic. It's all about timing. Timing is everything with magic. But it's abundant, like the life force, the joie de vivre, the moon moving into Leo. We have so much darkness in our world. Like, I can't even begin to express how much darkness there is. And we're in a time right now where we can reaffirm what's positive and good and righteous and loving and true in all of us without being pushovers, without being wallflowers, without being stepped on. We're in that time of season. And guess what? It starts right now when I say goodnight. And I'm about to say goodnight. So we're working on the website, should be up this week. Fingers crossed. If you want to get a reading, we'll have all that wired and ready to go. You can always hit like and subscribe on the way out. You can buy me a cup of coffee. But more importantly, when you wake up tonight, when you wake up tomorrow or go to bed tonight, just remember you are a magician and life is magic. That's it for tonight. We'll see you Tuesday with the Astro Weather. Robert Phoenix, God bless one and all, signing off.